The heavy oak door swung open with a groan that seemed to echo the dread in Jorna Lightfoot's chest, and she stepped into the farmhouse that was supposed to become her prison, her tusks catching the afternoon light as she glared at the man who would be her husband. He stood by the hearth, tall and lean with the sun-weathered skin of someone who worked the land from dawn to dusk. His hair was the color of autumn wheat, tied back carelessly, and his hands were rough with calluses. Those hands paused in their work of stoking the fire as he turned to look at her, and Jorna saw his eyes widen slightly at the sight of her, not with fear exactly, but with something she could not quite name. "You are Roland Mercer," she said, her voice flat and hard as stone. "I am." His voice was quieter than she expected, almost gentle. "And you must be Jorna." She did not answer. Behind her, the human diplomat who had escorted her from the border cleared his throat nervously. The old man had barely spoken to her during the 3-day journey, and she knew he feared her despite the treaty that had brought them together. Orcs and humans had been at war for generations. Blood spilled on both sides until the land itself seemed to cry out for peace. The treaty was fragile, a desperate attempt by both peoples to end the cycle of violence, and she was the price. "The bride price has been paid," the diplomat said quickly, eager to be done with his duty. "The marriage contract is sealed by the authority of both the human king and the orc chieftain council. May this union bring prosperity and peace to both our peoples." The words sounded hollow, rehearsed. Jorna wondered how many times he had practiced them. Roland nodded slowly, his gaze still on her. "Thank you for bringing her safely. Would you like to stay for supper?" No, I must return before nightfall." The diplomat was already backing toward the door. "I wish you both well." And then he was gone, leaving Jorna alone with her new husband in the quiet farmhouse. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. She stood rigidly, her leather traveling clothes dusty from the road, her few possessions in a worn pack on her back. She had been told what would happen. She would marry this human farmer, live on his land, bear his children if the gods willed it. She would be a symbol of peace, a bridge between two peoples who had spent lifetimes learning to hate each other. She had not been asked if she wanted this. No one had asked if she wanted to leave her clan, her family, her home in the highlands where the wind sang through the pine trees and the rivers ran cold and clear. No one had asked if she wanted to be sent away like a piece of livestock, traded for promises of peace that might crumble like dry leaves the moment it became inconvenient. "Are you hungry?" Roland asked, breaking the silence. "It has been a long journey." Jorna's jaw tightened. "Where do you want me?" He blinked, confusion crossing his face. "Want you? Where do I sleep? What work do you expect from me? I am strong. I can labor." She kept her voice cold, businesslike. If she was to be property, she would at least be useful property. That way, perhaps, he would not beat her. She had heard stories of human cruelty, of how they treated those they considered less than themselves. Something shifted in Roland's expression, a flicker of what might have been hurt. "You will sleep in the bedroom, of course. As for work, I would not expect you to do anything until you have rested. You must be exhausted. I am orc. We do not tire easily." It was not entirely true, but she would not show weakness to this human. Roland studied her for a long moment, and Jorna found herself unable to read his face. He had kind eyes, she noticed despite herself. Brown and warm like the earth after rain, but she had learned long ago not to trust appearances. "Well," he said finally, "I do tire easily and I am hungry, so I am going to make supper. You are welcome to join me, or you can explore the house and the farm if you like. The bedroom is through that door there." He pointed to a door on the far side of the main room. "There is a well outside for fresh water, and the privy is behind the barn." Then he turned back to the hearth and began pulling vegetables from a basket, as if her presence was nothing remarkable, as if he had not just been given an orc bride by royal decree. Jorna stood frozen, uncertain. This was not what she had expected. She had prepared herself for demands, for immediate consummation of the marriage, for orders barked like she was a servant or worse. But Roland simply began chopping carrots with practiced efficiency, humming tunelessly under his breath. Slowly, she lowered her pack to the floor. Her muscles ached from days of travel, and her throat was dry. She moved to the door Roland had indicated and pushed it open carefully. The bedroom was simple but clean. A large bed dominated the space, covered with a quilt in faded blues and greens. A wooden chest sat at the foot of the bed, and a small table with a wash basin stood near the window. Curtains, also faded but neatly mended, framed a view of fields that stretched toward distant hills. The last light of day painted everything gold. It was more than she had expected. More than she had allowed herself to hope for. She heard Roland moving in the other room, the clink of pots and the sizzle of something being placed in a pan. The smell of cooking food made her stomach clench with sudden hunger. She had eaten only dried meat and hard bread on the journey, the diplomat unwilling to stop for proper meals. Jorna returned to the main room and stood awkwardly near the table. Roland glanced at her and gestured to one of the chairs. "Please, sit. This will be ready soon." She sat, her movements stiff and careful. The chair creaked under her weight. Orcs were not as large as humans feared, not giants or monsters, but she was tall and solidly built, her body shaped by a life of hard work and harsher survival. Her people lived in the highlands where everything was earned through strength and determination. Roland worked in silence for a while, and Jorna watched him despite herself. His movements were efficient and sure, the movements of someone who had cooked countless meals alone. She wondered about him. The diplomat had told her little, only that Roland Mercer was a farmer who had agreed to the marriage as his part in the peace treaty. She did not know why a human would agree to marry an orc, what he hoped to gain from it. "Do you like rabbit?" Roland asked suddenly. "I eat meat," she said. "That is not quite what I asked, but I will take it as a yes." There was no edge to his voice, no mockery. He simply continued cooking, adding herbs to the pot that filled the room with a rich, savory smell. When the food was ready, he served them both, placing a generous portion on her plate. Jorna stared at it. The rabbit was tender and swimming in gravy, accompanied by roasted vegetables and thick slices of bread. It was more food than she had seen in one meal since leaving her clan. Roland sat across from her and began to eat. Jorna picked up her spoon slowly, still waiting for the trap, the price, the demand that would surely come. But Roland just ate, occasionally glancing out the window as the last light faded from the sky. The food was delicious. Jorna had not expected that. She ate slowly at first, then faster as her hunger overwhelmed her caution. Roland said nothing, but she saw him smile slightly when she accepted a second helping. "You cook well," she said finally, the words feeling strange in her mouth. She was not used to giving compliments to humans. "Thank you. I have had a lot of practice. I have been alone here for 3 years." "What happened 3 years ago?" Roland's expression clouded. "My brother died. He owned the farm with me, and when he passed, I inherited all of it. He was married, but his wife went back to her family. She did not want to stay on a farm with no other women around. Jorna absorbed this. You have been alone since then. Mostly. I go into the village for supplies and to sell my harvest, but yes, it has been lonely." He met her eyes. "That is not why I agreed to this marriage, though. I want you to know that. I did not do this just because I was lonely." "Then why did you do it?" Roland set down his spoon and leaned back in his chair. The firelight played across his face, casting shadows that made him look older than he probably was. My brother died in the war. He was conscripted, sent to fight your people on the northern border. He did not want to go. He loved the farm, loved the land. But he went because the king commanded it, and he never came home. Roland's voice was steady but edged with old pain. When they announced the treaty, when they asked for volunteers to marry orc brides as part of the peace agreement, I volunteered immediately. Because if my brother's death could mean something, if it could be part of ending this war, then maybe he did not die for nothing. The words settled between them like stones dropping into still water. Jorna stared at this human man, this farmer who had lost his brother to war just as she had lost her own brother, her cousins, her uncle. The war had taken so much from everyone. "I am sorry for your loss," she said quietly. "I am sorry for yours as well. I know your people have suffered too." Jorna looked away, her throat tight. She had not expected sympathy from a human. She had not expected kindness or understanding. She had armored herself against cruelty, but she had no defense against compassion. They finished the meal in silence, but it was a different kind of silence now, less hostile and more contemplative. When they were done, Roland began clearing the dishes, and Jorna found herself standing to help. He looked surprised but did not object as she carried plates to the wash basin. "You do not have to," he said. "I know." They washed the dishes together, falling into an awkward rhythm. Jorna's hands were larger than his, her fingers thicker, but she was careful with the pottery, mindful of her strength. She had broken things before, human things that were more delicate than the sturdy items her clan crafted. When the kitchen was clean, Roland turned to her. "I will sleep in the barn tonight. You can have the bedroom." Jorna frowned. "That is not necessary. We are married. In name, perhaps. But I will not claim any husband's rights until you are willing, if you are ever willing." He said it simply, without expectation or demand. "You did not choose this, Jorna. You were sent here. I will not add to that burden by forcing myself on you." She stared at him, searching for the lie, the manipulation. But his eyes were steady and sincere. "The treaty requires. I do not care what the treaty requires. You are a person, not a thing to be used. You will share my bed when and if you want to, not because some piece of paper says you must." Jorna felt something crack inside her chest, a tiny fissure in the wall she had built around her heart. She did not know what to say. In her clan, marriages were often arranged, but there was usually some courtship, some choice. She had been given no choice, no say in her own future. And here was this human, this enemy, offering her the very thing her own people had denied. "Thank you," she managed. Roland nodded. "Good night, Jorna. I hope you sleep well." He took a blanket from a chest and went outside, leaving her alone in the warm farmhouse. Jorna stood in the center of the room for a long time, listening to the crackle of the fire and the distant sounds of night insects. Then she went into the bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. She did not cry. Orcs did not cry easily. But she felt the weight of the past days, the past years, settling on her shoulders like a physical burden. She had been so angry, so ready to hate the human she was being given to. But Roland Mercer was not what she had expected. He was kind and sad and alone, and he had treated her with more respect in a few hours than the diplomats and leaders of both their peoples had shown in all the weeks of negotiation. Jorna lay down on the bed, still fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new uncertainties. But for tonight, she was safe and fed and unexpectedly granted a measure of dignity she had thought lost forever. She did not sleep for a long time. The morning came with the crowing of a rooster and the pale light of dawn creeping through the bedroom window. Jorna woke instantly, years of warrior training keeping her alert even in unfamiliar surroundings. She lay still for a moment, orienting herself, remembering where she was and why. She rose and straightened her clothes, then went out into the main room. The fire had burned low, but someone had fed it recently. The house was empty. Through the window, she could see Roland emerging from the barn, his hair disheveled and his clothes rumpled from sleeping on hay. Jorna felt a pang of something she did not want to examine too closely. Guilt, perhaps, or shame that he had given up his own bed for her comfort. She went outside and Roland looked up at her approach. His face was drawn with tiredness, but he managed a small smile. "Good morning." "I hope you slept well." "I did." "You did not," he shrugged. "The barn is not so bad. I have slept in worse places. You should not have to sleep in a barn on your own farm." "It is fine, really." He stretched, wincing slightly. "I need to milk the cows and feed the animals." "Then I will make us breakfast. Is there anything particular you like to eat?" Jorna shook her head. "I will help with the animals." Roland looked at her, surprised. "You do not have to do that." "I am not accustomed to being idle. Show me what needs to be done." He hesitated, then nodded. "All right, thank you." They worked together in the gray morning light. Roland showed her the cows, 3 placid beasts who regarded Jorna with mild curiosity but no fear. He demonstrated how to milk them, his hands quick and practiced, and Jorna watched carefully before trying it herself. Her first attempts were clumsy, but she was strong and determined, and soon she found the rhythm. Roland moved on to feeding the chickens and pigs while she finished with the cows. The work was simple but satisfying, and Jorna found herself relaxing into it. In her clan, everyone worked. There was no shame in labor, only in laziness. Here on this farm, she could at least make herself useful. When the chores were done, they returned to the house, and Roland made porridge sweetened with honey. They ate in companionable silence, and Jorna noticed that Roland's eyes kept drifting to the fields visible through the window. "You are worried about your crops," she observed. "A bit. I need to start harvesting the wheat soon, but it is a lot of work for one person. I usually hire help from the village, but they may not come this year." "Why not?" Roland looked uncomfortable. "Because of you, because you are orc. The villagers, they are not all happy about the treaty. Some of them lost family in the war. They may not want to work alongside an orc." Jorna's jaw tightened. She had expected this, but hearing it still stung. "I can help with the harvest. You do not know how? Then teach me." Roland studied her, and she met his gaze steadily. Finally, he nodded. "All right, we will start today." They spent the morning in the fields. Roland showed her how to use a scythe, how to cut the wheat in smooth, even strokes. It was harder than it looked, requiring rhythm and precision. Jorna's first attempts were rough, and she destroyed as much as she harvested. But Roland was patient, correcting her grip and stance without criticism, and gradually she improved. The sun climbed high and the day grew hot. Jorna's muscles burned with the unfamiliar motion, but she did not complain. She had endured worse. Beside her, Roland worked steadily, his movements efficient and tireless. They broke for lunch, eating bread and cheese under the shade of a large oak tree at the edge of the field. Jorna's hands were blistered despite her calluses, and she could feel the sun burning her skin. Orcs tanned less easily than humans, their green skin prone to painful burns under prolonged exposure. "You should wear a hat," Roland said, noticing her discomfort. "I have an extra in the barn. I am fine. You are getting burned. Please let me get you a hat." His concern was genuine, and Jorna found herself nodding reluctantly. Roland jogged back to the farmhouse and returned with a wide-brimmed straw hat that he placed gently on her head. It was too small, perched awkwardly on her head, but it did provide shade. "Thank you," she said. "You are welcome." He smiled, and for a moment Jorna felt something flutter in her chest. She pushed the feeling away firmly. They returned to work, and the afternoon passed in a haze of heat and repetitive motion. By the time the sun began to sink toward the horizon, Jorna's arms felt like lead and her back ached fiercely. But they had cleared a significant portion of the field, the wheat lying in neat rows ready to be bundled. Roland looked satisfied as they surveyed their work. "You did well. Better than I expected, honestly. You learn quickly. I am Orc. We are strong and stubborn." He laughed, and the sound surprised her. It was a good laugh, warm and genuine. "I am learning that." That night, Roland again offered to sleep in the barn, but Jorna stopped him. "The bed is large enough for two. We can share it without touching." He looked uncertain. "Are you sure?" "Yes. You need proper rest if we are to finish the harvest." Roland agreed, though she could see his nervousness. They prepared for bed in awkward silence, Jorna changing into a loose shirt she used for sleeping while Roland politely faced the wall. When they lay down, there was a careful distance between them, a neutral territory neither crossed. Jorna lay awake for a long time, hyper-aware of the man beside her. She could hear his breathing, feel the slight dip in the mattress from his weight. It was strange and uncomfortable, but also oddly comforting. She was not alone. For the first time since leaving her clan, she did not feel completely isolated. Eventually, exhaustion claimed her, and she slept. The days fell into a pattern. They rose with the dawn, tended the animals, worked the fields until the heat drove them to shade, then worked again in the cooler evening hours. Slowly, methodically, they harvested the wheat. Roland taught her how to bundle the stalks, how to build the sheaves so they would dry properly. He showed her the root cellar where they stored food for winter, the smokehouse where meat was preserved, the workshop where he repaired tools. Jorna absorbed it all hungrily. She had been raised to be a warrior, trained in combat and strategy, but she found satisfaction in this quieter kind of work. There was a peace in the rhythm of farm life, a connection to the land that she had not anticipated, and there was Roland. She found herself watching him when she thought he was not looking. The way he talked gently to the animals, the care he took with his tools and equipment, the quiet pride he had in his work. He was not a warrior, but he had his own kind of strength. He endured hardship without complaint, worked until his hands bled, and still found the energy to cook them good meals and ask about her day. He asked her questions sometimes about her life in the Highlands, her family, her clan. At first, she answered tersely, reluctant to share. But gradually, she found herself opening up. She told him about her brother Garak, who had died in a skirmish on the border 2 years ago. She told him about her mother, a skilled tanner who could make leather soft as silk. She told him about the long winters in the Highlands, when the snow piled high, and her clan would gather around fires to tell stories and sing songs. Roland listened to all of it with genuine interest, and in turn, he shared his own stories. He told her about growing up on the farm with his brother, about their parents who had died of fever when Roland was 15. He told her about the year the crops failed, and they nearly lost everything, about the neighboring farm where he had courted a girl who eventually married someone else. "Do you regret it?" Jorna asked. "That she did not choose you?" Roland considered the question. "I did for a long time, but now I think we wanted different things. She wanted excitement, adventure. I just wanted the farm and a quiet life. We would not have been happy together. And now?" "Are you happy?" He looked at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "I am happier than I expected to be." Jorna did not know how to respond to that, so she said nothing. But the words stayed with her, warming something deep inside her chest. 3 weeks after her arrival, they finished the wheat harvest. It was a good yield, Roland said, better than he had hoped. That night, he made a special dinner to celebrate. roasting a chicken and baking bread with the last of the summer berries folded into the dough. They ate and talked late into the night, and Jorna realized with some surprise that she was enjoying herself. Roland made her laugh with a story about a pig that had once escaped and led him on a chase through the village. She told him about the time her brother had tried to impress a girl by climbing a tree and got stuck, requiring the whole clan to rescue him. When they finally went to bed, the distance between them seemed smaller. Jorna lay on her side, facing away from Roland, but she was aware of his presence in a way that was no longer uncomfortable. It was becoming familiar. Normal. She was beginning to feel at home, but the fragile peace was shattered one afternoon when voices carried across the fields. Jorna looked up from where she was mending a fence post to see 3 men approaching the farm. They were human, rough-looking and armed with clubs and knives. Roland, working nearby, straightened and walked forward to meet them, his face carefully neutral. "Can I help you?" Roland asked. The leader of the group, a burly man with a scarred face, spat into the dirt. "You are harboring an orc, Mercer." "I am married to an orc, yes, as part of the treaty. The man said the word like a curse. "A piece of paper does not change what they are, monsters, savages. My son died fighting orcs on the border." "I am sorry for your loss," Roland said quietly. "My brother died in that same war. That is why we need peace." "Peace?" Another man laughed bitterly. "There is no peace with orcs. They will turn on us the moment it suits them." Jorna felt anger rising in her chest, but she forced herself to remain still. She would not give them the satisfaction of proving their prejudice right. The scarred man took a step closer to Roland. "We came to warn you, Mercer. The village is not happy about this situation. You bring an orc to our lands, you risk all of us. We want her gone. She is my wife. She stays. Then you are a traitor to your own kind." Roland's jaw tightened. "You need to leave, now." The scarred man's hand moved to the club at his belt. "Or what? You going to fight us, Mercer?" "You and your orc whore." Jorna moved before she could think better of it. She covered the distance between them in 3 long strides, putting herself between Roland and the 3 men. Up close, she towered over them, her green skin and tusks making her appear even more formidable. "You will not speak to him that way," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "And you will leave this farm. Now." The scarred man's face paled slightly, but he held his ground. "So the monster shows her true colors. See, Mercer, this is what you have brought into our community." "I see 3 men threatening a woman and her husband on their own land," Roland said, moving to stand beside Jorna. His voice was steady, but she could feel the tension radiating from him. "That is what I see. You will regret this, Mercer, both of you." The scarred man turned and stalked away, his companions following. But the threat hung in the air like smoke. When they were gone, Roland let out a shaky breath. "I am sorry. I knew there might be trouble, but I did not think they would come here." "They hate me," Jorna said flatly. "They hate me because I am orc. They hate what they do not understand. They are afraid. Fear does not excuse cruelty. No, it does not." Roland turned to her, and there was worry in his eyes. "Will you be all right?" The question surprised her. He was worried about her, not about himself or his farm or his standing in the community. "I have dealt with hatred before. I will survive." "I do not want you to just survive, Jorna. You deserve better than that." The words hit her harder than she expected. She looked at this man, this kind, stubborn man who had given her respect and shelter and something that might be friendship, and she felt the walls around her heart crack a little more. "So do you," she said softly. They stood there for a moment, the afternoon sun warm on their faces, and something shifted between them. Something fundamental and frightening and unavoidable. That night, Jorna lay awake long after Roland's breathing had evened into sleep. She thought about the men who had come to threaten them, about the hatred in their eyes. But more than that, she thought about Roland standing beside her, defending her, treating her like she mattered. She had been sent here as a bargaining chip, a symbol of peace between warring peoples. But somewhere along the way, she had become something more. She had become a person to Roland, not just an orc or a wife in name only. And Roland had become important to her in ways she was only beginning to understand. It terrified her. The next morning, Roland announced that he needed to go to the village for supplies. "I will be back before dark," he said. "Will you be all right here alone?" "I am not helpless, Roland. I know. But after yesterday, I worry. Let me come with you." He looked surprised. "Are you sure?" "After what happened, it might not be safe. If we hide, we let them win. We let them dictate how we live." Jorna met his eyes. "I will not hide." Pride flickered across Roland's face. "All right, we go together." The village was small, barely more than a dozen buildings clustered around a crossroads. As they approached, Jorna saw people stop and stare. Women pulled their children close. Men's hands moved to weapons that were not there. The fear and hostility were palpable. Roland kept his head high and his pace steady, and Jorna matched him step for step. They went to the general store, a cluttered building that smelled of spices and leather and dust. The proprietor, an elderly man with a lined face, looked up as they entered, and his expression hardened. "Mercer," he said curtly. "Master Thompson, I need supplies." Roland pulled a list from his pocket and began reading items. The shopkeeper gathered them without comment, his movements stiff and reluctant. Jorna stood near the door, trying to make herself as unobtrusive as possible. She could feel eyes on her, hear the whispers from people passing by outside. It took all her self-control not to react. When Roland went to pay, Master Thompson named a price that was clearly inflated. Roland's jaw tightened, but he paid without argument. As they were leaving, the shopkeeper spoke again. "You are making a mistake, Mercer. That thing will bring you nothing but trouble." Roland turned slowly. "That thing is my wife, and she has more honor than most humans I have met." He walked out, and Jorna followed, her heart pounding. They loaded the supplies into the wagon in tense silence, aware of the villagers gathering to watch. The scarred man from yesterday was there, along with others who looked equally hostile. "We should leave," Jorna murmured. Roland nodded and climbed onto the wagon seat. Jorna sat beside him, and he clicked the reins to set the horse moving. They had made it perhaps 20 yards when something struck Jorna in the shoulder. She flinched, more from surprise than pain, and saw a rock fall to the ground. More rocks followed. The crowd was throwing things, and their shouts grew louder, uglier. Roland urged the horse faster, but a rock caught him on the side of the head, and he cried out. Blood streamed down his temple. Jorna grabbed the reins from his hands and snapped them hard. The horse bolted, the wagon careening wildly down the road. Behind them, the shouts faded. Jorna kept the horse running until they were well clear of the village, then slowly brought it under control. Roland was slumped beside her, blood staining his shirt. Jorna's hands shook as she stopped the wagon and turned to him. "Roland, can you hear me?" "I am all right," he mumbled, but his eyes were unfocused. "Just dizzy. We need to get you home." Jorna took the reins again and drove as quickly as she dared. By the time they reached the farm, Roland was barely conscious. Jorna half carried him into the house and laid him on the bed. She fetched water and cloth, cleaning the wound as gently as she could. It was a nasty gash, but not deep enough to be fatal. Still, head wounds were dangerous. She had seen warriors die from less. She sat beside him as the afternoon faded into evening, changing the bandage and watching for signs of fever. Roland drifted in and out of sleep, occasionally murmuring words she could not understand. Jorna held his hand and prayed to God she was not sure were listening. Night fell, and still she kept vigil. She could not lose him. The realization struck her with the force of a physical blow. She could not lose Roland. He had become too important, too precious. He was not just the human she had been forced to marry. He was kind and brave and good, and he had defended her even when it cost him. She loved him. The thought should have terrified her. Loving a human went against everything she had been taught, everything her clan believed. But as she sat in the darkness, holding Roland's hand, Jorna found she did not care. Her clan had sent her away. They had made the choice to sacrifice her for peace. And Roland had welcomed her, treated her with dignity, made her feel valued. If loving him was wrong, then she would be wrong. Roland woke near midnight, his eyes clearing as he focused on her. "Jorna, I am here." She squeezed his hand gently. "How do you feel?" "Like I was hit by a rock." He tried to smile, then winced. "Wait, I was hit by a rock." "Several, actually. You have been unconscious for hours." "Hours." He struggled to sit up, and Jorna helped him, propping pillows behind his back. "You have been here the whole time." "Where else would I be?" Roland looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "You were afraid for me." It was not a question, but Jorna answered anyway. "Yes." Why? The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Jorna could lie, deflect, protect herself. But she was tired of walls and defenses. She was tired of pretending. "Because I care about you," she said quietly. "Because you matter to me. Because I do not want to live in a world where you are hurt or suffering." Roland's hand tightened on hers. "Jorna, you do not have to say anything," she interrupted. "I know this is complicated. I know I am orc and you are human, and our peoples are barely at peace. I know loving each other is dangerous, but I cannot help how I feel." "Loving each other," Roland repeated, and his voice was soft with wonder. "You love me." Jorna met his eyes, those warm brown eyes that had shown her nothing but kindness. "Yes, I love you." Roland pulled her forward, cupping her face with his free hand. "I love you too. I have been falling in love with you for weeks, and I was too afraid to say it. Too afraid you would not feel the same, or that I was trapping you in something you did not want." "I want this," Jorna said fiercely. "I want you." He kissed her then, careful and gentle and full of emotion. Jorna leaned into the kiss, pouring all her fear and hope and love into the connection between them. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "You are hurt," Jorna said. "You should rest." "I have rested enough." Roland tugged her closer, and she went willingly, lying down beside him on the bed. He wrapped his arms around her, and Jorna rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "What do we do now?" she asked. "The village hates us. Your own people attacked you because of me. Then we will manage without the village. We have the farm and we have each other. That is enough." "Is it?" "It is for me." Roland pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I would rather live out here with you, alone and happy, than have the approval of people who cannot see past their own hatred." Jorna closed her eyes, letting his words wash over her. It would not be easy. The world would not suddenly accept their union just because they loved each other. But Roland was right. They had each other, and they had this place, this farm that was slowly becoming home. It would have to be enough. The days that followed were both the happiest and most challenging of Jorna's life. Roland recovered from his injury, though he bore a scar on his temple that would never fully fade. They threw themselves into the work of the farm, preparing for winter. They harvested the last of the vegetables, repaired the barn roof, and laid in supplies of firewood and preserved food. But they also faced hostility from the village. No one would trade with them. Master Thompson refused to sell them anything, and the other villagers followed his lead. Roland tried to make arrangements with traders from other towns, but word had spread. and many refused to do business with someone married to an orc. They were being isolated, cut off from the community that should have supported them. Jorna saw the strain it put on Roland, the worry that creased his brow when he thought she was not looking. They were running low on things they could not produce themselves: salt, sugar, lamp oil, metal tools. "We will find a way," Roland insisted when she voiced her concerns. "We always do." But Jorna knew it was not that simple. Winter was coming, and if they could not get supplies, they might not survive it. The solution came from an unexpected source. One morning, Jorna woke to the sound of voices outside. She and Roland rushed out to find a group of orcs standing in the farmyard. At their head was a woman Jorna recognized instantly. Mother. She could barely believe her eyes. Jorna Lightfoot stood tall and proud, her graying hair bound in traditional braids, her leather armor marking her as a clan elder. Behind her were a dozen other orcs, including Jorna's younger sister, Vala. "Daughter," Jorna said, her voice formal but not unkind. "We have heard troubling reports of how you have been treated by the humans." Jorna's heart sank. "Have you come to take me back?" "We have come to assess the situation. The treaty requires that you be treated with respect and dignity. If the humans have violated that agreement, the treaty may be void." Roland stepped forward, and Jorna saw several of the orc warriors tense. "I have treated Jorna with all the respect and dignity she deserves. It is not me who has failed her, but the village that will not accept our marriage." Jorna studied Roland with sharp, assessing eyes. "You are the human husband. I am Roland Mercer. And you claim to treat my daughter well." "I claim nothing. Ask her yourself." Jorna turned to Jorna, and Jorna saw the question in her mother's eyes. This was a test, a chance to escape if she wanted it. All she had to do was say the word, and her mother would take her home. But home was no longer in the Highlands. Home was here with Roland. "He has treated me better than I could have hoped," Jorna said clearly. "Roland is kind and honorable. He defends me even when it costs him. I am happy here, mother, truly happy." Jorna's expression softened slightly. "You love him." "Yes. And does he love you?" Roland spoke before Jorna could answer. "With all my heart." The assembled orcs murmured among themselves. Jorna held up a hand for silence. The treaty specified that orc brides would be married into human communities, integrated into their societies. But it seems the humans do not want integration. They want to isolate you, to punish you for existing. "The humans in this village, perhaps," Roland said, "but not all humans, and not me." "One good human is not enough to make a society," Jorna said sharply. "My daughter should not have to live in isolation and fear." "What are you suggesting?" Jorna asked, though she feared she knew. "Come back with us. Both of you, if this human truly loves you. There is land near our clan's territory, good land. You could farm there, be part of our community. We would protect you from human attacks." Jorna looked at Roland, her heart torn. It was a generous offer, more than she had expected. But it would mean Roland giving up everything, leaving his home and his people to live among orcs. Roland met her eyes, and she saw the conflict in his face. This farm was his life, his legacy from his parents and brother. Asking him to leave, it was asking him to abandon everything he held dear. "I cannot ask you to do that," Jorna said quietly. "You are not asking. Your mother is offering." Roland took her hand. "And I am considering it." "Roland, this is your home." "You are my home," he said simply. "Where you are, that is where I want to be." Tears pricked Jorna's eyes. She had not cried since she was a child, but now she felt the hot sting of them threatening to fall. "This farm means everything to you." "It meant everything to me before I had you. Now it is just land and buildings. Important, yes, but not more important than you." He turned to Jorna. "I would be honored to join your clan if you would have me. But I need time to arrange things here, to ensure the farm does not fall to ruin and that the animals are cared for. Thella nodded slowly. That is fair. We will wait. Over the next few days, a strange and wonderful thing happened. The orc warriors who had come with Thella made camp near the farm, and they helped with the work. They were curious about human farming methods, and Roland was happy to teach them. In turn, they showed him orc techniques for preserving food and preparing for harsh winters. Jorna spent time with her sister Vala, who was full of questions about life among humans. Is it very different? Vala asked. Yes and no, Jorna said. The work is similar, just on a smaller scale, but the attitudes are different. Humans are more isolated, less communal. You miss the clan. Jorna considered the question. Sometimes I miss you and Mother and the songs we used to sing, but I am happy here. Roland makes me happy. Vala smiled, a mischievous glint in her eye. He is handsome for a human. Vala, what? I am just saying you could have done worse. They laughed together, and Jorna realized how much she had missed this, the easy companionship of family. She had been lonely without knowing it, isolated in her new life. Having her clan here, even temporarily, filled a void she had not acknowledged. But she also watched Roland with his farm, saw the love and care he put into every task. This place was part of him, woven into his identity. Could she really ask him to leave it? That night, as they lay in bed, Jorna voiced her concerns. You do not have to come with me to Orc lands. I could visit you here, spend part of the year with the clan and part with you. Roland was quiet for a long moment. Would that make you happy, being split between two worlds? I do not know, but I do not want you to resent me for taking you from your home. Jorna, listen to me. Roland turned to face her, his expression serious. I love this farm. It has been my life for 27 years, but I love you more, and I would rather build a new life with you than cling to an old one alone. But what if you hate living with the clan? What if you cannot adjust? Then we will figure it out together. That is what marriage means, is it not? Facing challenges together, adapting, compromising. I am willing to try if you are. Jorna kissed him, pouring all her gratitude and love into the gesture. I am willing. Then it is settled. We will go to Orc lands and build a farm there. And maybe, someday, when the world is kinder and humans and orcs can live together in peace, we will come back here. But until then, I go where you go. They made love that night, finally consummating the marriage that had begun so coldly and become something beautiful. Jorna had been with partners before, but never with someone she loved, never with someone who looked at her like she was precious. Roland was gentle and patient, and when they joined together it felt like coming home. Afterward they lay tangled together, their breathing slowly returning to normal. I love you, Jorna whispered. I love you too, Roland replied. Always. The preparations took another week. Roland found a family in a nearby town willing to buy the farm and care for the animals. It was not what the property was worth, but it was enough to start fresh. He packed the things that mattered most: his father's tools, his mother's quilt, the carved wooden horse his brother had made when they were children. The day they left, Roland stood for a long time looking at the farmhouse, his face unreadable. Jorna stood beside him, holding his hand. Are you all right? She asked. I will be, he said. It is just strange leaving. I thought I would grow old here, be buried next to my family in the little cemetery on the hill. We can come back and visit when things are safer, maybe. Roland turned to her, and there was peace in his eyes despite the sadness. But wherever I am with you, that is where I am meant to be. They mounted the horses the clan had provided and rode away, following Thella and the others toward Orc lands. Jorna looked back once, seeing the farm growing smaller in the distance. Then she turned forward toward the future, toward the unknown. The journey took 5 days. They traveled through the highlands, following ancient trails that wound between mountains and across rushing rivers. The landscape was wild and beautiful, and Roland stared at everything with wide eyes, clearly awed by the majesty of orc territory. When they finally reached the clan's settlement, Jorna felt a rush of conflicting emotions. This had been her home for 18 years before she was sent away. The familiar tents and sturdy wooden buildings, the scent of pine smoke and cooking meat, the sound of children playing and warriors training. It was all exactly as she remembered, but it was also different. She was different. She was no longer the young orc woman who had been sent away to secure peace. She was someone new, someone who had learned to love across the boundaries of species and culture. The clan received them with cautious curiosity. Roland was the first human most of them had ever seen up close, and they studied him with frank interest. Some were hostile, remembering the war and the losses they had suffered. But others were welcoming, especially after Thela made it clear that Roland was under her protection. They were given a plot of land at the edge of the settlement, good farmland near a stream. It was smaller than Roland's farm had been, but it was theirs. They began immediately to build, working long hours to construct a small house before winter arrived in full force. The clan helped, and Jorna was grateful for it. Her cousins and neighbors brought tools and materials, shared advice and labor. Slowly, a home took shape. It was different from the human farmhouse they had left behind, built in the orc style with thick stone walls and a steeply pitched roof to shed snow. But Roland adapted, learning new techniques and incorporating his own knowledge. Vala became a frequent visitor, and Jorna was amused to see her sister's obvious interest in Roland's friend from the nearby town who had helped them sell the farm. The man, a merchant named Thomas, had followed them to orc lands, claiming he wanted to establish trade routes. But Jorna suspected his interest was more personal. Winter came, and with it, the true test of their new life. The highlands were brutal in the cold months, with snow that piled higher than a person's head and winds that could strip flesh from bone. But their house was sturdy, their stores well stocked, and they had each other. They spent the long winter nights by the fire, talking and planning and dreaming of the future. Roland learned the orc language, his accent atrocious but his effort appreciated. Jorna taught him the songs of her people, the stories and histories passed down through generations. In turn, Roland shared human tales, and soon orc children were gathering to hear his stories of brave knights and clever farmers. It was not always easy. There were misunderstandings, cultural clashes, moments of frustration when they felt like they were from completely different worlds. But they worked through it, always coming back to the foundation of their love and respect for each other. Spring came, and with it, new challenges and new joys. They planted their first crop in orc lands, mixing human and orc farming techniques. Roland's knowledge of crop rotation and soil management impressed the clan elders, and soon other orc farmers were seeking his advice. Jorna found herself becoming a bridge between worlds, translating not just languages but ideas and customs. She helped humans who came to trade understand orc etiquette. She helped her clan understand human perspectives and concerns. It was exhausting work, but also deeply satisfying. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple, Roland took her hand. "Are you happy?" he asked. Jorna considered the question. She thought of all they had been through, all they had sacrificed and gained. She thought of the farm they had left behind, the family they had built here, the love that had grown between them. "Yes," she said. "I am happy. Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible." Roland kissed her gently. "Thank you for giving me a chance all those months ago. Thank you for not hating me on sight." I did glare at you quite ferociously, Jorna said with a smile. You did. I was terrified. And then I softened. You did, and I fell in love with you. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge, pinpricks of light in the darkening sky. Around them, the clan was settling in for the night, smoke rising from cooking fires, voices calling out greetings and farewells. You think it will ever be easier? Jorna asked. Being together, I mean. Do you think humans and orcs will ever truly accept each other? I do not know, Roland said honestly. But I think we are proof that it is possible, and maybe that is enough. Maybe one couple at a time, one friendship at a time, the world can change. That is optimistic of you. I am an optimist. You married an optimist, you know, Jorna laughed, the sound echoing in the mountain air. I suppose I did. Summer brought news from the human lands. Messengers arrived with reports that the treaty was holding, that the peace was fragile but enduring. There had been no major conflicts in over a year. Small steps, but steps nonetheless toward a better future, and there was other news, more personal and more joyous. Jorna was pregnant. She told Roland one morning as they worked in the garden, her hands trembling slightly with nervousness and excitement. I am with child. Roland dropped the hoe he was holding, his face cycling through shock, disbelief, and then pure joy. Truly, truly. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop. We are going to be parents, he said, his voice full of wonder. You and I, we are going to have a baby. Half orc, half human, Jorna said. A child of two worlds. A child of love, Roland corrected. Our child. The pregnancy was difficult. Orc and human bodies were similar enough that conception was possible, but the differences caused complications. Jorna was sick frequently, and the clan's healers watched her carefully, worried about the mixed blood. But Roland was by her side through all of it, holding her hair when she vomited, rubbing her aching back, singing soft songs when she could not sleep. Their child was born on a cold autumn morning, delivered with the help of Thela and the clan's best midwife. It was a long and painful labor, and there were moments when Jorna feared she would not survive. But finally, she heard the sharp cry of a newborn, and the midwife placed a tiny, squirming baby in her arms. A son, Thela said, her voice thick with emotion. You have a son. Jorna looked down at the baby and felt her heart expand impossibly. He was small and wrinkled, with wisps of dark hair and skin that was a soft olive green, somewhere between her green and Roland's tan. His ears were slightly pointed, and when he yawned, she could see the tiniest buds of tusks beginning to form. Roland knelt beside the bed, staring at their son with tears streaming down his face. He is perfect, he whispered. Absolutely perfect. What should we name him? Jorna asked. They had discussed names for months, unable to agree. Orc names were harsh and strong, full of consonants. Human names were softer, more melodic. They needed something that honored both heritages. Rockin, Roland said suddenly. It sounds orc, but it is close to my name. Roland Mercer Lightfoot. Jorna tested the name, feeling how it fit in her mouth. Rockin, I like it. Roland Lightfoot Mercer. Lightfoot Mercer, then, Roland agreed. He reached out and gently touched his son's tiny hand, and Roland's fingers curled around his father's finger with surprising strength. Hello, Roland. I am your father, and I love you already more than I knew was possible. The months that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and constant worry. Roland was a healthy baby, but raising a child was exhausting work. Jorna and Roland took turns walking him when he cried, feeding him, changing him, marveling at every tiny development. The clan embraced Roland with surprising enthusiasm. Orc children were precious, and every child was considered the responsibility of the entire community. Rocken was passed from hand to hand, cuddled and cooed over by warriors who could snap a man's neck with their bare hands. It was both heartwarming and slightly terrifying. As Rocken grew, it became clear he had inherited traits from both parents. He had Jorna's green skin and budding tusks, but Roland's brown eyes and hair. He was strong like an orc child but curious and gentle like a human. He was, in every way, a perfect blend of both worlds. One evening, when Rocken was almost a year old, Jorna and Roland sat outside their house, watching their son toddle around the garden on unsteady legs. Vala was visiting, having recently married Thomas the merchant in a ceremony that blended human and orc traditions. "You two started something, you know," Vala said, bouncing Rocken on her knee. "Since you proved it was possible, there have been 3 more human-orc marriages, and there is talk of establishing a mixed settlement, a place where both peoples can live together." Jorna felt a surge of hope. "Really? Really? You and Roland, you are proof that it can work, that love can bridge even the deepest divides." Roland took Jorna's hand and squeezed gently. "We are just trying to live our lives and raise our son. If that helps others, I am glad, but we did not do this to be symbols or pioneers." "Sometimes you do not have to try to change the world," Vala said. "Sometimes just living your truth is enough." That night, after Vala had left and Rocken was asleep in his cradle, Jorna and Roland lay together in their bed. Through the window, they could see the stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on velvet. "You ever regret it?" Jorna asked. "Giving up your farm, leaving human lands?" "Never," Roland said firmly. "This is exactly where I am meant to be. With you, with our son, building a life that we choose. I miss the farm sometimes, miss my brother and the life I thought I would have. But I would not trade what we have for anything." "I love you," Jorna said, the words coming easier now after months and years of practice. "I love you so much it frightens me sometimes. I love you too, and I am not frightened at all. I am just grateful." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, their son sleeping peacefully nearby, the future stretching before them full of possibility and promise. Years passed. Rocken grew into a bright, energetic child who moved easily between the human and orc parts of himself. He learned to speak both languages fluently, to honor both cultures. He played with orc and human children alike, making friends without seeing the differences that divided their parents' generations. Jorna and Roland's farm prospered, becoming known throughout the region for its innovative techniques and bountiful harvests. They traded with both human and orc communities, building bridges through commerce and cooperation. Other mixed couples sought them out for advice and encouragement, and their home became a gathering place for those who believed in a different kind of future. The treaty held, and slowly, painfully, humans and orcs began to see each other as something other than enemies. There were still incidents, still prejudice and fear. But there was also progress, small victories that added up to real change. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Roland surprised Jorna with a trip back to his old farm. The family who had bought it welcomed them warmly, showing them how they had expanded the fields and added new buildings. The place was thriving, and while it made Roland a bit melancholy to see it, Jorna could tell he was also proud. They visited his family's graves on the hill, and Roland introduced Jorna properly to his parents and brother, speaking to the headstones as if they could hear. "This is my wife, Jorna, and our son, Rocken. I wish you could have met them. I think you would have loved them." Jorna laid flowers on each grave, orc mountain flowers that she had brought from their new home. "Thank you for raising such a good man," she said quietly. "Thank you for teaching him kindness and honor. I will take care of him, I promise." On the way back to orc lands, they stopped in the village where they had been attacked. It was a different place now, more open and less hostile. The scarred man who had threatened them was gone, moved away or died, and the new generation seemed less certain in their prejudices. Master Thompson's general store was now run by his daughter, a practical woman who greeted them with cautious courtesy and fair prices. It was not friendship, not yet, but it was not hatred either. It was a start. That night, camping under the stars, Roland held Jorna close. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For glaring at me that first day, then slowly softening. For giving me a chance, for building this life with me." Jorna smiled against his chest. "Thank you for seeing past the orc to the person. Thank you for being patient and kind and stubborn enough to not give up on us." "I could never give up on us." "Neither could I." Rocken stirred in his sleep nearby, murmuring something unintelligible, and they both smiled. Their son was the future, the living proof that different peoples could not just coexist but thrive together, creating something new and beautiful from the combination of their heritages. More years passed, and their family grew. Jorna gave birth to twins, daughters they named Rhea and Mira, who had their father's gentleness and their mother's fierce spirit. The farm expanded, and they took on apprentices, teaching both orc and human youths the art of cultivation and the importance of cooperation. Rocken grew into a young man, tall and strong and wise beyond his years. He became a mediator, traveling between human and orc communities to help resolve disputes and build understanding. He was respected by both peoples, seen as neither and both, a bridge incarnate. When Jorna's mother Thela passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by family, Jorna grieved deeply. But she also felt grateful for the years they had been given, for her mother's acceptance of Roland and her grandchildren. Thela had been among the first to see the possibility of peace, and she had lived long enough to see it begin to flourish. Roland's hair went gray at the temples, and Jorna's face gained lines of laughter and worry. They aged together, their bodies changing but their love only deepening. They had built something remarkable, not just a farm or a family, but a testament to the power of understanding and compassion. On a warm summer evening, when they were both well into middle age and their children were grown with families of their own, Jorna and Roland sat on the porch of their house and watched the sunset paint the mountains in shades of fire and gold. "You remember that first day?" Jorna asked. "When I arrived at your farm, angry and scared and ready to hate you. I remember. You glared at me like you wanted to tear my throat out with your bare hands." "I did want to," Jorna admitted, "for about 5 minutes. And then you offered me food and shelter and respect, and I started to soften." "Best thing that ever happened to me, you softening." "Best thing that ever happened to me, too." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching as their grandchildren played in the garden. Little ones with varying shades of skin, some with tusks and some without, all of them loved and cherished. The future, tangible and hopeful. "We did good work," Roland said quietly. "Did we not?" "We did," Jorna agreed. "We built a life worth living, raised children who will make the world better. We proved that love is stronger than hate. That was always the most important thing." Yes, it was. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Jorna leaned her head on Roland's shoulder and he wrapped his arm around her. They had been given to each other as part of a political treaty, two unwilling participants in a grand experiment. But they had taken that beginning and transformed it into something extraordinary. They had chosen love over hate, understanding over prejudice, hope over despair. And in doing so, they had changed not just their own lives, but the lives of countless others. Their story would be told for generations, a tale of an orc bride sent to seal a treaty who glared at a farmer and then slowly softened, and how that simple change of heart had rippled out to touch an entire world. It was a good story. It was a true story, and it was theirs. The years continued their inexorable march, and Jorna and Roland grew old together, their bodies weakening but their spirits strong. They celebrated Rocken's marriage to a human woman who loved him fiercely, and they welcomed more grandchildren into their ever-expanding family. They saw the mixed settlement Vala had mentioned become reality, a thriving community where humans and orcs lived side by side in harmony. And when, many years later, Roland passed away peacefully in his sleep with Jorna holding his hand, she mourned deeply but not hopelessly. He had given her a lifetime of love, had shown her that bridges between peoples were not just possible but essential. She had his children and grandchildren as his legacy, and she had the memories of decades spent building something beautiful together. She lived a few more years, long enough to see her grandchildren have children of their own, long enough to know that the peace she and Roland had helped nurture was growing stronger with each generation. And when her time came, she went peacefully, content in the knowledge that their love story had mattered, that it had changed the world in ways both large and small. Their house remained, maintained by their descendants as a reminder and a symbol. The farm continued to produce bountiful harvests, worked by human and orc hands together. And their story was told and retold, a tale of hope in dark times, a reminder that love could bloom in the most unlikely places and overcome the deepest divides. The orc bride who had been sent to seal a treaty, who had glared at a farmer and then slowly softened, became a legend. But more than that, she became proof that change was possible, that individuals could choose compassion over hatred, that two people from different worlds could build something beautiful together. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy anyone could leave. Not just a life well lived, but a world made better by the living of it.